Mississippi Association of Supervisors that represents all 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. There's 410 supervisors, 5 in each county, and we represent county governments throughout the state of Mississippi, which are the places where the rubber meets the road. Today we're at our midwinter legislative conference, which happens to be on the first day of the legislative session this year. But we've had our conference today, which committee meetings and General Assembly. We've ratified our legislative proposals, and then we left our General Assembly loaded buses and headed to the Capitol, and all our members came to the Capitol, and we heard from the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker Pro Tem, and many other legislators today, Chairman of the Transportation Committee, to tell us things that are going to be going on in this legislative session, issues that are going to be affecting county government, and it gives us also a chance to talk to them and ask questions about how we can work together to prevent things such as unfunded mandates, how we can work together to improve roads and bridges and infrastructure in our state.
What are some of the issues in this session of the legislature that affect local government?
Well, there's several. You got the charter schools, you got the local bridge system. We're trying to work on money for roads and bridges.
One of the top items is LSBP funding, which it didn't get funded last year, but I knew it would, but they just didn't. We batted 1,000 on everything else, mainly except for the bond issue, the fire truck program, and the LSBP.
What would you like to see happen in this session of the legislature?
Well, maybe just no unfunded mandates. Just don't put any more pressure on the county government as far as where we have to raise taxes. And the bridge issue, the LSBP, would be great to fund it too.
We've got bridges on rural county roads that need attention to, and this is areas to where without this funding it won't happen, and that's why we need our legislature to help us funding for these types of bridges.
We got bridges that's in disrepair across the state with no money to fix the bridges. One of the big things is trying to find a permanent funding source for our LSBP projects.
What would be one good source?
Well, to come up with a tax structure that would be a permanent. Right now, our LSBP funding is year to year with the sale of bonds. I know our Lieutenant Governor is against the selling of bonds, and that to do so, we need to come up with a very permanent funding source for that project.
How critical is infrastructure to the counties in Mississippi?
It goes a long way with economic development projects across the state with not having proper bridges to get goods in and out. It plays a major factor in that.
Your bridges nowadays cost $1 million or better. That's a small bridge, and we need every bit of the funding we can get to try to get these bridges replaced, because you got school buses, you got transports, you got families crossing them, and it's just a dangerous situation.
One of the things that we're concerned about mainly every year is unfunded mandates, laws that pass that cause county to spend money that is not budgeted for.
And what would you like to see happen?
Well, I would like to, first of all, like to see there's no unfunded mandate that is passed from the legislature to county government that cause the cost to be passed on to constituent. That means taxes goes up.
And give us an example of how this has created a problem in the past.
Well, when you a county supervisor, of course, everybody go through the budget process, and the budget process is basically spending or allocating money that you already have and that you believe is going to come in that year. And when there's no money there, then the state says, I need for you to do this or do that, then there's no money appropriated for it, then you have to use other means to do the same service, which means you have to tax your citizen.
Some of the things, of course, are the homestead exemption and the reimbursement. Also, the charter schools are we're very interested in how that may come out. And also, we are concerned about a cost of living raise for the supervisors. Also, just making sure that there is no non-funded mandates that come down from the state level.
What kind of problems do unfunded mandates cause for county government?
Well, they raise taxes on a local level. Anytime that there is a non-funded mandate, it comes down to the local level. Then the supervisors and the cities have to raise taxes on the local citizens.
We're very interested in our Parish Association retirement remaining the same as is. We think it's one of the best in the state of Mississippi and the United States of America. We don't want that to change any. Next thing is pay raise for supervisors. I think it's been almost now 10 years. and we would patiently await a raise. But overall, I'd like to say everything here today has been fine and wonderful, and I think we're on a good start. Most things went well in 2012, but we're still going to pursue our dreams in 2013.
First guest with us today is our Lieutenant Governor, Tate Reeves. Help me welcome our Lieutenant Governor.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. It's always great to have our fellow elected officials in the state capitol, and particularly here today on our very first day of the 2013 session. We were blessed to gavel in at noon today. In my chamber in the Senate, we'll actually have one new member was here today. We'll have 2 new members as elections transpire over the next 45 days or so. And so there's a lot of change in the legislature, but there's also a lot of the same challenges out there that we all have to deal with. And as I spoke to you and every one of you at the convention back in the summer and trying to lay out what those issues are, one of the things that I think we all can agree on is that our #1 priority in our state must be job creation. What can we do to bring better and higher paying jobs to Mississippi? But I have a political philosophy and a political view which says government does not create jobs. Government simply creates an environment which encourages the private sector to invest capital and create jobs. And what I've told all the members of the Senate and all my friends in the House is this: in every single bill that comes before the legislature this year, that's the question we should ask ourselves, just like we did last year, is this: if we pass this legislation, if it becomes law, is it going to help foster that environment which encourages the private sector to invest capital and create jobs? When I was running for this position in 2011, I talked to many of you individually, and I talked to your leadership and talked to Derek and others and said this: we may not agree on every piece of legislation, but my one commitment to you then, and it's still a commitment today, and I think we fulfilled that in the 2012 session, is this: if there is an issue that comes before the legislature that affects local governments, you as the boards of supervisors, you as the Mississippi Association of Supervisors, will have a seat at the table to offer input. And that's, I think, the least we can do in the legislature as we move forward. I think all of you are aware of some of the things that have transpired in the last 45 days as it relates to the local system bridge money. It's something that's obviously very, very important to all of you in your counties. But as I remind folks all the time, your constituents are my constituents, and it's important to me too. As I mentioned in the summer, my vision is in the long term, we should do what was originally intended in that local system bridge program. When then State Senator Amy Tuck filed the original piece of legislation in the early 1990s, the first several years of that program, it was appropriated out of state dollars. That's a win-win for everyone, because then we're not issuing more debt for the taxpayers of our state, and therefore not spending more money on interest costs. But in addition to that, if we appropriate it on July 1 of the beginning of the fiscal year, the monies are available, as opposed to having to wait for the bond commission to meet for it to be signed off on, etc. I'm happy to tell you, and I hope you already know this, that the Joint Legislative Budget Committee met in September and again in November and offered our Joint Legislative Budget Committee recommendation. And in that recommendation, it calls for a $20 million appropriation in this year's budget to fund the local system bridge program. And that's was a general consensus of the entire Joint Legislative Budget Committee. It shows the intent of the legislative leadership, and particularly the fiscal leadership of our state, to fund that. And I think that's a major, major step forward for the program, for each of you as elected members of boards of supervisors, and most importantly, it's a major step forward for our constituents. And I think that's something that we can be very, very proud of. Again, as we progress through the session, there are going to be issues that come up. I met with your legislative leadership team just in the last 30 to 45 days to talk about some of the issues that we know
is going to come before us in the legislative session, but as is always the case, there are going to be issues that perhaps today you and I aren't looking at that are going to pop up in this legislative session. And again, I'll reiterate that my commitment to you is on those issues that affect you, you will have a seat at the table to discuss what is in the best interest of all of our constituents. And in addition to that, we are continuing to work very hard to ensure, as we did on several pieces of legislation last year, when there are issues that affect local governments that are potentially going to cost you money, i.e. unfunded mandates, we are going to oppose that at the legislative level because that's not right. We have approximately a $20 billion budget that flows through our coffers. That includes federal money, state money, and special funds money. And those of us in the legislative leadership don't like it at all when Congress or federal agencies give the state unfunded mandates. We should apply that same criteria as we are working with you, understanding that we have the same constituents. And when taxes go up on one of your constituents, rightly or wrongly, when taxes go up on one of your constituents, that means taxes are going up on some of my constituents as well. And that's not something any of us should be proud of. In these tough economic times, we've got to work together to be more efficient, to find ways to save money in government, and ensure that our taxpayers are getting the services that they need. That doesn't necessarily always mean they're getting all the services that they want. And that's just the nature of the beast in these tough economic times. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks by again welcoming you back to your state capitol, congratulating you again on having such a huge crowd here today, to let the members of the legislature, the House and the Senate, know where you stand on the various issues that are before us. And I look forward to working with you in 2013 to make Mississippi a better place to raise a family and to make Mississippi a better place to live. Thank y'all.
Let me just say that I certainly appreciate the Lieutenant Governor. I've served in the Senate now for some 20 years, and I want to express my appreciation to the Lieutenant Governor for tapping me to serve as chairman of the Highways and Transportation Committee, but in addition to that, to be the subcommittee chair for the appropriation of highways and transportation and to serve on the budget committee. So with that, we were very pleased to be able to, again, as the Lieutenant Governor indicated, to put the $20 million. As you well know, last year we did not do a bond bill, and we had been doing the bundling of the bridge program. So as a result of that, the money was not put there at $20 million, but we did go into the budget committee this year with the idea of making sure that the $20 million was given. But even when we do that, we know that $20 million is going to take us a long, long way, but it's not going to actually give us the money to catch up with all of the bridges and the problems that you have in the various counties and municipalities. So with that, we are looking from Highways and Transportation as a way to how do we generate new revenue, revenue in a different kind of way so that we can add dollars to that. We cannot do that, though, without you. You recognize that your budget has shortfalls like the state budget and the federal budget has shortfalls. So if we don't begin to think out front from a transportation point of view on what we're going to do with our bridge system, what we're going to do with new construction as far as highways are concerned, when you have economic development projects, how do we build it so that individuals will come, and then how do we maintain it? And in order to do that, we have to look at the resources that are available. So we're going to be looking at those kind of things. When we do that, we'll be coming to you to say this is a way of looking at doing it, or many ways of looking at doing it, and soliciting your support to do that. We also recognize that many of you have ports and rail lines in your system, short rails. So with that, we're going to be looking at how do we enhance and put more dollars in place so that we can maintain and rehab those rail systems if there's a need for such. So the transportation system, we see it, as the Lieutenant Governor indicated, that it is a way of putting an infrastructure in place to help you grow your communities, your counties, and help us create jobs where possible. And without that, it's not likely it's going to happen. So as Chairman of Highways and Transportation for the next 3 years and working with Chairman Robert Johnson on the House side, we're going to be advocating that we should look at our infrastructure in the way of transportation and look at all phases of it, whether it be highways, rail system, the airports, or the ports, and looking at what we can do to, again, cause Mississippi to be in a position to attract industry and bring industry in so that we can create jobs and keep our citizens working. That's kind of what we're going to be doing over the next few months that we're going to be here. We will be looking at some of the local legislation that you send down to us in the way of naming highways and renaming highways. Don't send us so many because we begin to run out of space on what name to put on it. As a matter of fact, in some cases, we're having to look at overlapping names because we get so many requests coming in. But we're going to be looking at those kind of things that you send to us and working with the county officials and Steve, your representative here, and others that you have here in the Capitol to make life as comfortable as possible and give you the support you need to make your counties what they should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another member I want to acknowledge is a former Legislative Committee Chairman of our Supervisors Association. Representative Manley Barton here serves on the County Affairs Committee as well as Transportation. And I tell you, it's always a blessing and a plus to have a former county supervisor in the legislature to help with our issues throughout the course of the process of legislative session. And I want to hand the mic over right now, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. I've got a lot of real good friends that's still in this room. I served as supervisor for 3 terms from Jackson County, so this is kind of like coming home. I do serve on the County Affairs Committee. I also serve on the Transportation Committee. Chairman Johnson's not here today, but I can tell you, working with him for the last session, he and Chairman Simmons from the Senate are all on the same page in terms of realizing how important the infrastructure is, transportation infrastructure is to the state and our economic development effort. We can stand up and talk about economic development, bringing jobs to the state from now till dark, and unless we've got the transportation infrastructure in place, they're not going to come. So we've got to, as a state, be willing to make those investments to help the counties to do these things. And I think the committees, as they're set up today, I think they're committed to do that. And so I know the chairman are, and Chairman Simmons, and we've had a number of meetings together. And I know that they're committed to do it. You heard that from him today, and I know Chairman Johnson in the House feels the same way. I also serve on the County Affairs Committee, and so from that committee, I can tell you that the folks that y'all have got up here, Derek, Steve, and so forth, have worked real hard to make the legislators aware of those issues and how the issues that come to the committees that affect the counties and what those effects are going to be. And I think they do a good job of that. And I was on the legislative committee for years when I was a supervisor, and so I've been on the other side working, standing in the hall trying to talk with legislators about a bill that you either want to pass or kill. And so I've been on that side too, so I know what it's like to have a bill that's out there that's going to have an effect on the counties and how frustrating it is sometimes to make people in the legislature understand that if you pass this bill, then we're going to have to make other changes at home. We may have to raise taxes. We may have to do some things differently. And so hopefully I can be that advocate up here to make sure that I can help some of the other legislators understand, what some of those local issues are. And I think I know most of the groups that are part of your legislative committee today and have worked with them in the past, so I look forward to working with them in the future. Thank you.
It's a pleasure being here with you. I had the honor of speaking to y'all last session. The counties run this state. We know that here in Jackson. Sometimes you may think we forget that, but we know the reality of that. We know that's where the rubber meets the road. I hope you're going to find that we're going to be responsible stewards of our business here, and that we don't cause you any more problems back home than you need to have, because I know how that works. Sometimes the mentality seems to be, you know, the answers are in Washington. Well, the answers aren't in Washington. Now, aren't in Jackson either. They're back with the voters back home, and y'all know that better than anybody. You know, we've got issues with county that are issues with you. I've been over your agenda, seen it. Certainly, we're very sensitive to it. Some things that I think you're going to find, I hope we make some progress on. You know, we had an issue last year with respect to road and bridge funding. I think we're going to do that this year. We're going to find a way to do that, whether it's through bonding or some other way, but I believe we've got pretty good commitment all around to find a way to do that. Same with the fire truck acquisition. Again, that's something we may not be bonding, but we're going to find a way to make that happen through the appropriations process, we hope. There's not anything really for me to say other than welcome. We do rely on y'all. I certainly rely on my board in Lauderdale County, where I live, and on Clark County, where I'm proud to serve as their board attorney. I feel like I'm plugged into county government pretty well. They try to make sure that's the case anyway, isn't that right, Mickey? So we're proud to have you here with us. Our doors are open. I'm the Speaker Pro Tem. My office is on the third floor. You're certainly welcome to come see me anytime. It's right off the chamber. I kid people about, it's the truth though. They ask me, well, what's the difference between the Speaker and Speaker Pro Tem? What is Speaker Pro Tem anyway? And Pro Tem or Pro Tempore means for the time being. I tell them I'm Speaker when the Speaker's not there. But I say, you know, the real difference is the Speaker's office has a bathroom in it. And the Speaker Pro Tem's office used to be a bathroom. And that's literally the truth. Back before the Capitol was renovated, I guess in the early 80s, the room that is now the Rules Room and Management Committee room was the Speaker's office, back when the current Speaker's office was the Secretary of State's office. And the room that is now Speaker Pro Tem's office was the Speaker's bathroom. So, you know, it's not hard to be humble in that sort of situation, so what can I say? But we are very, very glad to have you here. If there's any questions you have of us, certainly of me, don't hesitate to let me hear from you. We would welcome that. And as I say, I feel like I'm pretty attuned to county government. I hope so. And again, we're here to serve you, and hope you'll give us that opportunity. Thank you.
First and foremost is infrastructure, local system bridge program, any type of other income that we can get as far as revenue from the state to help with local infrastructure needs. Making sure there's no unfunded mandates that are passed down through the legislative session, very important part of that. Also, we're having a lot of trouble with 911 funding issues because the amount of revenue is going down. We receive $1 per landline for emergency 911. Well, everybody is getting rid of their landline and changing to a cell phone. And a county only receives 68 cents from a cell phone. So the revenue is declining, but at the same time, we're having to increase the amount of technology that we place on the towers. And we're also having to increase the manpower in our 911 centers because of the increase in volume of calls. So that's a public safety concern that we've got to figure out a way to address.
One issue that's going to be before the legislature is charter schools. Is the association taking a position on that, and how would that affect county government?
We do not have a position on charter schools as of yet. Our main worry and concern about charter school legislation is funding, because you're creating another school district and another school building and transportation needs, and you only have the same pot of money that you're working from. So our concern is that if we're having difficulty funding our current school system and we create a charter school, how is the same pot of money going to be able to fund the school system that is there today and the charter school system? That's our concern. We're working with the House and the Senate Education Committee chairman to make sure that we address this in the legislation. Those chairmen are also going to be at our conference tomorrow as we continue to have educational sessions to speak to our members. And our members will have a chance and an opportunity to ask questions about that legislation, because I think there's a lot of unknowns in how the funding will work for charter school. And I think it's important that we get that right on the front end so the taxpayers will be protected once the legislation is enacted.
Another issue revolves around something called the 13th check. Tell us about that.
13th check is a cost of living adjustment for our public employee retirement system. And there's been some discussions and hearsays about the public employee retirement system and the funding for that system and how stable it is. And the 13th check, there's no doubt about it that that's a revenue driving source that takes revenue out of the system. But it's very, very important for retirees, whether they be future, current, or past retirees, that the system is stable for public employee retirement systems, but also the 13th check is kept in place just as it was meant to be. So that's important to our members and to our public officials.
It's a very productive meeting, and everything's going real well. We got 82 counties, great participation, and we're doing what the people sent us here to do for.
I'm very encouraged by it. It seems like it's a lot of bipartisan, both across the tables to work together to solve a lot of problems that we got across the state. One of the other issues that we got is our rural fire truck acquisition fund that is very crucial across our state, that helps provide funding so we can ensure good fire protection in our rural communities.
We hope that we have a very successful year, that we stay within budget, and that all of the legislative issues that we have to come before the boards, to come before our legislators will pass.
Anytime there's numbers that shows up at the Capitol, it's a great sign. That's a sign of support. That's a sign saying that of strength. So as long as we get our members to support issues as relate to the legislature, then we're going to do fine.
We've had a very good group of local county supervisors come to the Capitol. We loaded down 2 buses, and there's over hundreds of people here today, so I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by the Lieutenant Governor speaking to us and talking about fighting against unfunded mandates. I'm also encouraged about the Lieutenant Governor speaking about we would always have a place at the table, a seat at the table when there's legislation that's going to impact local county governments. And I'm encouraged about the Senate Transportation Committee Chairman talking about trying to figure ways to provide more funding for transportation, whether it be local or statewide transportation.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
They should contact our office, or they can go on our website is the easiest way, and that's mssupervisors.org.